When you think of Afghanistan, chances are megaprojects are not the first thing that comes to mind, but that picture is changing. Right now, the country is building a 285-kilometer canal in the north that's wide enough to be called a man-made river. A $10 billion gas pipeline is planned to run straight through Afghan soil, connecting Central Asia to South Asia. High-voltage power lines are being strung across mountains to plug Afghanistan into a regional grid. And outside Kabul, an entirely new city is being laid out on empty land to relieve the capital's overcrowding. And that's only the beginning. Over the next few minutes, we'll break each one down, how big they are, where they stand today, the problems they're meant to solve, and the obstacles they face. By the end, you'll see a side of Afghanistan that rarely makes headlines. A country trying to build its future with megaprojects that will surprise just about everyone. Afghanistan has long been associated with conflict, instability, and missed opportunities. But beneath that image, the country holds something incredibly valuable: location and resources. Afghanistan sits at the crossroads of Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East. For centuries, it was part of the Silk Roads where trade caravans passed through carrying spices, silk, and precious metals. In modern terms, that same geography means Afghanistan could be a transit hub for pipelines, highways, and railroads linking landlocked nations to global markets. It's not just location. Afghanistan is also rich in natural resources. Estimates suggest the country's mineral reserves, copper, iron, lithium, and rare earth elements, are worth over $1 trillion. Add to that its rivers, which, if managed with modern infrastructure, can irrigate farmland and generate electricity for millions. So while Afghanistan has struggled to build in the past, the logic behind these megaprojects is simple. If the country wants to move from aid dependency to self-reliance, it needs infrastructure that produces food, power, revenue, and jobs. That's what these massive megaprojects aim to do. Let's start with the Kosh-Tepe Canal. For most of its history, northern Afghanistan has been dry land with scattered pockets of agriculture along rivers. Farmers depended almost entirely on rainfall or small irrigation ditches, which meant frequent droughts, crop failures, and food shortages. The Kosh-Tepe Canal is an attempt to change that story completely. This project is not just large by Afghan standards, it's on the scale of some of the biggest waterworks in Asia. The canal will stretch about 285 kilometers from the Amu Darya River across the provinces of Balkh, Jawzjan, and Faryab. At points, it's more than 150 meters wide and around 8 meters deep, big enough that locals call it a new river rather than just a canal. If completed as planned, it will irrigate 550,000 hectares of land. That's nearly 5,500 square kilometers of desert turned into farmland, the equivalent of an entire country like Brunei. Afghanistan imports a large portion of its wheat, despite being a traditionally agricultural nation. If the canal delivers as planned, farmers in the north could not only meet domestic demand, but eventually start exporting grain and cotton. For a country where food insecurity has been one of the biggest obstacles to stability, that's no small shift. Progress has been faster than many expected. By late 2023, the first 100 kilometers of the canal were already dug. By the end of 2024, Taliban officials claimed 90% of the second phase was finished. Today, bulldozers and excavators are still pushing through the desert, with over 2,000 machines and thousands of workers working non-stop. Water from the Amu Darya has already been diverted into some stretches, creating streams where there was once only sand. But here's where the problems start. Unlike concrete-lined canals in countries like China or India, the Kosh-Tepe is currently built as an earthen canal. That makes it vulnerable to collapse, leaks, and erosion. In 2023, a section of the canal failed because the soil wasn't compacted properly. Unless lined or reinforced, huge amounts of water could seep away before it even reaches the farms it's supposed to irrigate. And lining a canal of this size with concrete or stone would require billions more dollars, money Afghanistan doesn't have readily available. Then there's the political dimension. The Amu Darya is not just Afghanistan's river, it flows through and sustains Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan downstream. Those countries already face water shortages, and they see the Kosh-Tepe as a threat to their own agriculture. Uzbek officials have openly expressed concern, fearing that Afghanistan's project could reduce water flows for millions of their farmers. In short, one country's solution may be another country's crisis. Despite all of this, inside Afghanistan, the canal is seen as a project of pride and survival. Tens of thousands of farmers are waiting for reliable irrigation that could finally give them steady harvests. Entire rural economies could spring back to life. For many Afghans, this canal is a symbol that the country is trying to move away from dependence on aid and towards self-reliance. It's a gamble, a massive bet that Afghanistan can transform its agricultural base, feed its population, and even reshape its role in Central Asia. The question now is whether the engineering challenges and political pushback can be managed long enough for that bet to pay off. However, water is one part of the story. Afghanistan doesn't just need food, it also needs fuel. And that's where the next megaproject comes in. If the canal is about food, the TAPI pipeline is about energy and money. TAPI stands for Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and it's been on the table since the 1990s. The idea is simple. Turkmenistan has huge gas reserves it can't fully sell. Pakistan and India have massive populations with constant energy shortages. Afghanistan sits between them. The solution is a pipeline. The numbers are big. The pipeline will run about 1,800 kilometers, with 774 kilometers crossing Afghanistan. Once it's built, it will carry 33 billion cubic meters of gas per year. That's enough to meet the annual household needs of about 50 million families. Afghanistan itself would get 5 billion cubic meters for domestic use. On top of that, transit fees could bring in around $1 billion a year. And during construction, the project could create over 12,000 jobs just inside Afghanistan. This project has been delayed for decades. First by war, then by politics, and always by security. But in late 2024, something changed. Turkmen and Afghan officials held a ceremony at the border and actually started construction on the Afghan side. By early 2025, the Taliban announced that about 14 kilometers of pipe had already been laid inside Afghanistan. That's a tiny fraction of the total distance, but it's the farthest this project has ever gone. Bulldozers and heavy machinery are on the move, and the Taliban are treating it as a flagship project. But the challenges remain the same. Can they secure hundreds of kilometers of remote terrain? And what happens if India and Pakistan, two of the buyers, hit a political deadlock? Still, the fact that the pipe is actually in the ground in Afghanistan marks a turning point. For Kabul, this is not just about gas, it's about proving that Afghanistan can host a project that connects four countries, survives regional politics, and brings in steady money year after year. If it works, Afghanistan isn't just a transit country anymore. It's a key player in regional energy. Energy projects may bring in money and power, but they don't solve Afghanistan's overcrowded cities. For that, planners are attempting something even more ambitious, building a brand new city. Kabul today is bursting at the seams. The old city was built for about 500,000 people. Today, it holds more than 5 million. Streets designed for donkeys and bicycles are clogged with cars. Hillsides are covered with unplanned housing. Power lines are overloaded. Water pipes leak or don't exist. It's chaos and it's not sustainable. So the answer on the table is bold: build a new city next door. About 20 kilometers north of the current capital, in Daysabs, sits the blueprint for Kabul New City. It covers a staggering 740 square kilometers, larger than Singapore, and it's designed to host more than 3 million residents. This is not just more housing blocks. The plan divides the city into clear districts: government, business, residential, and industrial. Wide boulevards replace the jammed roads of old Kabul. Parks and green corridors are baked into the design from day one. Utilities are laid out properly: clean water pipes, sewage systems, and a grid that can handle solar-powered districts. It's the kind of city that Afghans have always dreamed of, but never had the chance to build. The idea is not new. It was first proposed back in 2008 with an eye-watering budget of $15 billion. For years, it was just drawings and PowerPoints. But in 2023, the Taliban brought it back to life. a pilot phase covering about 250 hectares broke ground, planned for around 12,000 residents. Roads are being carved, bridges are going up, water lines are being laid. This time, it's real, and as of 2025, progress is visible. Officials say that about a quarter of Phase 1 is complete, with 600 workers on site every day. Surveying and design work for more roads has been finished. Contracts have been signed with Afghan companies to build blocks of housing. And foreign investors are being courted, especially from Turkey, Qatar, the UAE, and Iran, to pour money into the next stages. Now, will Kabul New City solve every problem? Of course not. Financing remains the biggest challenge. Governance is another. New cities fail when there's no clear management or when corruption eats away at budgets. But for the first time in nearly 2 decades, you can actually go out there and see construction. Asphalt is being poured. Foundations are being dug. This is not just a plan anymore. It's a city under birth. If it works, it could relieve the crushing pressure on Kabul, give millions of Afghans a modern place to live, and stand as proof that Afghanistan is not only patching the past, it's building the future. While Kabul New City looks inward, Afghanistan is also looking outward, linking itself to international energy grids. Electricity in Afghanistan has always been unreliable. Most families rely on imported power from Uzbekistan or Tajikistan, and when those lines go down, the generators start humming. They're noisy, expensive, and dirty. The CASA 1000 project is meant to change that by plugging Afghanistan into a much larger regional grid. CASA stands for Central Asia-South Asia 1000. The project is basically a giant transmission line running from the hydropower dams of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan down into Pakistan, with Afghanistan right in the middle. In summer, when rivers in Central Asia are high, there's too much power. In Pakistan, demand spikes with air conditioners in factories. CASA links the two. For Afghanistan, there are 2 big benefits. First, the country gets up to 300 megawatts of power directly from the line, enough to ease blackouts for hundreds of thousands of homes. Second, just by hosting the lines, Afghanistan will collect millions of dollars every year in transit fees. It's a steady income without having to burn a drop of fuel. By 2021, about 70% of Afghanistan's section was already built. Towers were standing, and nearly all the equipment, about 95% of it, was delivered and stockpiled. Then the political shift happened, and work froze. But now it's restarting. The World Bank has agreed to release new funding under a special system that bypasses Taliban ministries, routing money directly to contractors and auditors so the project can move ahead. Meanwhile, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Pakistan have nearly finished their parts. They're desperate to see Afghanistan's link complete because without it, the whole project is a billion-dollar network of stranded assets. Afghan officials say once the funds are released, finishing their part won't take long. Regional energy projects like CASA 1000 highlight Afghanistan's geography as a connector. That same logic is driving another megaproject, CPEC Extension. Now, let's step out even further. For years, Afghanistan has been left out of the region's biggest infrastructure push, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This is China's flagship project in South Asia. Highways, railways, pipelines, and ports stretching from Kashgar in western China down to Gwadar on Pakistan's Arabian Sea coast. Billions of dollars have already been poured into it. And in 2025, Afghanistan officially joined. In August, the foreign ministers of China, Pakistan, and the Taliban government met in Kabul and announced that it will now extend into Afghanistan. The geography makes this dramatic. Afghanistan's border with China is tiny, just 92 kilometers through the Wakhan corridor. But if new roads or even a rail spur cross that strip, Afghanistan would gain its first direct overland link to China. Combine that with routes south into Pakistan and Gwadar, and suddenly Afghanistan is not landlocked anymore. For China, the interest is obvious. Afghanistan has over $1 trillion in mineral wealth, copper, lithium, rare earths, the stuff that batteries, electronics, and modern tech need. For Pakistan, extending it north adds another trading partner to the corridor. And for Afghanistan, it means access to ports, markets, and investment. Now, no construction has started yet. As of today, this is still political agreement and early planning. But the fact that all three governments stood side by side in Kabul and publicly announced it is significant. It means feasibility studies, customs planning, and financing talks are on the way in CPEC's second phase. Of course, challenges loom. Chinese projects in Afghanistan have failed before, like the stalled copper mine at Mez Ainak, and Afghanistan will have to prove that CPEC infrastructure benefits everyone, not just a few elites. But symbolically, Afghanistan is now officially inside the Belt and Road network. That's a huge shift. Instead of being bypassed, Afghanistan is being invited in. And if it works, it could transform how goods move, how minerals are exported, and how Afghanistan connects to the global economy. Afghanistan's rivers are both its lifeline and its battleground. They hold the key to food security and electricity, but they also spark disputes with neighbors downstream. Three dams capture this story perfectly: Pashtun, Bakhshabad, and Kamal Khan. The Pashtun Dam sits on the Hari River near Herat. Work started over a decade ago, but it was plagued by delays. Finally, in August 2025, it was inaugurated. The dam now stores 54 million cubic meters of water, irrigates about 13,000 hectares, and generates 2 megawatts of electricity. It cost around $117 million, pulled from Afghanistan's own budget. For local farmers, especially those growing saffron and grapes, it's a lifeline. But it's also a point of tension. Iran sits downstream, and Tehran has protested that Pashtun will cut flows into its territory. The Taliban say the impact is minor and that Afghanistan has the right to use its own water. Either way, the dam is finished and it's operating. Farther south in Farah province is the much bigger Bakhshabad Dam. This one has been on the drawing board for decades. When complete, it's supposed to hold over 1 billion cubic meters of water, irrigate more than 170,000 hectares, and generate 30 megawatts of power. That's transformative for one of the driest parts of the country. Work was restarted in 2023, with diversion tunnels and access roads under construction. But it's far from finished, and Iran is even more worried about this one, since the Farah River flows into its territory. So when you look at Afghanistan's dams, you see both sides of development. On one hand, water storage and power supply that transform life for farmers and towns. On the other, rising diplomatic heat with neighbors who have grown used to those rivers flowing freely. Either way, the dams show that Afghanistan is no longer leaving its water untapped. It's storing it, using it, and in the process, changing regional politics. Put all of these projects together and you see a country trying to build, not just survive. If even half of these succeed, the changes are enormous, but the obstacles are real. Money is short, politics are fragile, neighbors are wary. And Afghanistan's terrain makes every kilometer of construction a fight against the mountains. But the ambition itself is striking. For once, Afghanistan is on the map not because of conflict, but because of what it's trying to build. So the real question is, which of these megaprojects do you think will actually make it to the finish line? Will the Kosh-Tepe Canal deliver water year after year? Will the Tapi pipeline finally become a reality after 3 decades of talk? Will Kabul New City rise from the dust? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.